open up the floor to questions that are in the chat around 3. So just keep those coming and stay involved in the conversation. Kevin, would you like to kick off at all?
Sure, yeah. So thank you all so much for joining today. This is an event presented by Code with Pride. Code with Pride is a community that was formed out of LaunchCode, basically to provide a space where the LGBTQ community can come together as they work to advance and break into tech careers. We've been around for about 2 years now, founded in 2018. And we're super excited for this event today. And I am going to introduce our moderator for the day, and that is our marketing manager at LaunchCode, Kennedy Brown.
Again, hey everyone. Just for clarity, I use she, her pronouns. And Kevin gave a great rundown on LaunchCode and Code with Pride. I'm just going to take a second before we get started to thank our event sponsors today, 1904 Labs and Information Technology at Nestle. They helped us a lot by just, bringing this event to life today. And of course, none of it would be possible without our Code with Pride leads, Rosanna Speller and Kevin Kickham. So thank you to them as well. Today, we're just gonna have a great conversation about the celebration and uplifting of our community through Pride Month and beyond, and especially how that is changing just because 2020 has been the beast that it has been. And then, talking about how we can be connecting and leveraging resources right now and moving forward. I'd love to have our panelists go ahead and introduce themselves and the work that they're doing. I'm just gonna start in my top left with Jimmy. You'll kick us off.
Sure, so James Lesch, I work for Vivent Health. We provide wraparound services for people living with HIV and AIDS. Formerly known as St. Louis Effort for AIDS. We rebranded at the beginning of this year. 2019, we opened our new medical home in Midtown, expanding our services from social services, testing and prevention to include medical, pharma, and we are adding a behavioral health service, dental service, and legal service in the near future, all part of our medical home model to be kind of a one-stop for people living with HIV and AIDS and those at risk.
Awesome, thank you. Randy, would you like to take a second to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Randy L. Rafter. I'm the president of Black Pride St. Louis. Black Pride St. Louis is the nation's second oldest Black gay pride organization. Our big thing is we sit at the intersection of Black and queerness. We do a lot of things. Our biggest thing is to be a catalyst for the Black LGBTQIA community, focusing on different areas such as education, economic development, health and wellness, arts and culture, and of course, social and civil justices. So we try to be there to connect all those different points within our community.
Great, thank you. Shira, can you fill us in on what you're doing?
My name is Shira. My pronouns are they, them. I am the communications manager for Promo, which is Missouri's statewide organization that advocates for LGBTQ equality. We do so through legislative work, electoral politics, grassroots organizing, and community action. Promo is also involved in promoting the equality and protecting the human and civil rights of all LGBTQ people in Missouri. And we have Sage of Promo Fund. I always forget. Sage of Promo is our direct service organization that promotes and enhances the well-being of LGBTQ seniors in our Missouri community. It is a part of a national organization, Sage USA, and we focus specifically on the aging population amongst our own community in Missouri.
Great, thank you. Jay Marie, will you go ahead and introduce yourself as well?
Surely can do. Hey y'all, so Jay Marie here, they, them. I am the Trans Justice Organizer for the ACLU of Missouri, is one title that I hold. Recently also done a lot of things. There's a lot of links there. Okay, so I have recently been a part of a team that made sure that during the kind of coronavirus intensity the first wave, as we might come to call it, that folks who are queer and trans and or sweet of some type, which is maybe a new term to many of you, but for Black folks, it's kind of an in-group thing, you know what I'm saying? You know somebody's sweet, you got that sweet tea in you, it's just kind of a thing that we know. And we wanted to add that to the framing of that project. So Sweet And was a coronavirus relief fund that we put up for the state. Also did a bike ride last year. We don't have to put that up there. I mean, it's all good. We might do it again when the world opens up one day. But, you know, I'm just all about embodied joy, Black folks specifically. So obviously in this moment, I'm feeling a lot of things and really wanting to make sure that the conversation has room for all of us. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us, of course. Sayer. Sayer, your video. Okay.
Yeah, I got you. My name's Sayer Johnson, he, him, his. I'm the executive director of the Metro Trans Umbrella Group, which is a grassroots nonprofit that's dedicated to providing social and emotional support and building power for trans expansive adults in the metro area. We also provide basic supports with food and toiletries. I'm also a coordinator of a project called the Trans Queer Flat that is a affordable, affirming housing opportunity for trans expansive adults.
Great. Thank you all for, just taking a second to introduce yourself and the work that you're doing. We have a lot of resources here today, so I'm excited just to see how this conversation unfolds. I would like to start just by talking about Pride Month this year and how we are approaching that differently, what it looks like to be just getting involved and continuing to build a stronger queer community and giving back as we're doing so from home. And then of course, as J. Marie mentioned, really focusing on and centering the members of the queer community that are feeling the weight of all of the injustice going on, as well as, we're on the front lines of battling police violence. So I'd just like to talk about that for a second. Randy, would you mind kicking us off with your thoughts on all of that?
Sure. So first off, I will say that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And it's one of my key things I always go back to, because sitting at the point that we sit as an organization with Black and queerness, it's important for us to make sure to understand that there's a double consciousness that Black queer folk have to go through that sometimes others don't recognize or don't realize. So at one point, I turn on to where I'm the activist, or I'm out in the streets, or I'm taking phone calls and making sure that, as a Black man, I stand up for my people and my culture. And then the next moment, as I try to take the breath to release, then I'm turning around, and then all of a sudden there's a Black trans person that we just found was just reported that was killed. And so understanding that double consciousness of being Black and queer exists, and that almost feels like some people of color within both of these communities, there needs some extra support. I'm going to be completely honest. If you can say, I love you, I'm here for you, what can I do for you? That'll be huge, even in this point, because there's a lot. And if you can get out in the streets, go for it. If you can't, figure out a way that you can help, because right now people are hurting. And we continue to see the same cycle happen over and over and over again, and there's still nothing being done. And you would think, well, we just did this 2 years ago, we just did this 5 years ago, and we're still seeing injustices happen on an everyday basis. So I'm not upset about any of this. I'm glad that we're going to continue to come together as a community until there's a change. So I'll stop because I'm a talker.
No, absolutely. No need to stop. I'm curious as well, how do you foresee the St. Louis community, especially, going about Pride Month differently this year?
So Pride Month's definitely going to be different across the country. We still have the epidemic of COVID-19, and so with that, a lot of prides are going. First off, they're going virtual. So there are going to be some different types of celebrations. Some prides had to cancel their events because at the same time, understanding that the LGBT community we sit at a point to where there's a lot of people within our community who are immune compromised. And so that's going to be something that's different for us. We're used to coming together as a community to stand up with each other. This year it's going to be a little different, to where it might be you might have to celebrate and do your pride via a call like we're having today, and make sure you wear your colors, or different things as well, from understanding. The other thing I want to say and make sure it's understood that a lot of prides use their Pride Fest as an opportunity for them to raise funds to do programming work throughout the rest of the year. And so with that being said, this may be their main fundraiser that they do. So they might not be able to get as many funds as they were in other experiences. I know we had to cancel our Black Pride Fest here in St. Louis because of understanding our community's health. And then also because we knew that the funding was not going to be there to be available like it would need to be. So we're going to be working very hard. So if you can donate to any of the organizations that are out here doing the work, please do, because they're going to need you more than ever, because of what's going on in today's society.
Absolutely. In addition to donating, are there other ways that we should be seeking to give back? And of course, everyone feel free to jump in here as it pertains to your organization and your work.
First off, as a Black queer person, check on us. If you're a friend, if you're an ally, check on your people. If we're a family and we're supposed to be there for each other, ask them, don't ask them, okay, is there something I can do to help? Or for those who are immune compromised and would like to go to a festival but they can't, maybe you drop off a package of pride things just to show them that, hey, I love you, I know you can't be here, but we can celebrate in a social distance way. Those are two things that come to the top of my mind. Others, please chime in on that too.
As the other Black person on this panel, who's not the moderator, I'm going to offer, why is my phone popping off? My goodness, these people, sorry, y'all. I was just going to offer a couple other things. So on the one hand, definitely if for Randy's suggestion, some of you, that might be what you need to be doing, finding your folks. I think my actual hope is that, on the tip of like checking in with people, that you actually have so many people in your kind of network that are Black that you actually can't check on any of them on your own. Like it shouldn't, that, they actually are probably handling their business, and you can just, reach out to them and say, I love you. As always, ideally there's a continuation you're offering. You're not trying to become somebody's new friend, right? This is not the time for that. So please don't hit us up if you don't talk to us on a regular. Now is the time to create a commitment to do that, right? And so one of the things that's going to happen, I'm pretty sure, so tomorrow there's already a rally that folks, if you haven't already been out, or if you've already been kind of like weighing what makes sense for you as a queer person, especially, there is, in terms of like where to plug in and what you feel like drawn to being accountable to, there's a rally tomorrow. Folks are planning, and there'll be legal observers, it'll be socially distanced. We're going to do all the things we can just to keep people safe in general whenever we gather. But like I said, individually, I think now is a really important time that you actually are shifting your focus. Maybe you check on your folks that you love, that you work with, that they might be running through it and trying to figure out how to be their best self. And so you're there to flank them. But really, this is a time to be committed to a larger frame than your individual Black friends, right? This is the time in the world when you don't actually say, oh, I'm not racist, I have a Black friend, or I do good work, my comrade is Black and they, hold it down. Now is actually not the time for that, in my experience, in my opinion. Now is the time for us to be thinking about Black folks as a whole, policing as a whole. And the ways that intersects with our community is that trans folks experience disproportionate treatment, poor treatment, disrespectful treatment, being locked up from police, right? White gay folks, not necessarily a thing that is constantly being talked about because it's not happening, right? And so we have to talk about what the issues really are. And, we're gonna have our policing kind of calls and conversations and all of that. But a lot of people don't recognize, and a lot of, maybe pride or these bigger kind of institutional things don't recognize and are not prepared to talk about the real kind of lived experience of Black folks who happen to also be trans and or queer. So that is something that I'm not an expert that speaks for every single person ever on, but it is highlight that, you know, on this call, having us here to talk about it is one portion of the effort, but really people showing up. And if you can't, you know, join via car, roll up on folks, make sure you got your signs up so they know you're a safe car. And, you know what I'm saying, put your body, put your car, put your vehicle on the line so that when people do come through, people already have a history of being hit in the Grove when they go protest. So if you are going to be that person who's going to come join, put your car in between that. You know what I'm saying? Like I have that on video on my phone, right? Like I have video of my friends getting hit by a car because this person felt like it was more important to drive through a peaceful protest of people being frustrated that at that point somebody had been killed, Kiwi Herring, right? So now is the time to like really elevate, and we don't need to be talking about the same things. We need to be doing different things. So that means showing up. It looks like it's still coming into fruition, but it looks like we're going to be doing Black Trans Thursdays this month to highlight, like in terms of actions that will probably have a car component to them, an access point to them. But Black Trans Thursdays, where we're, you know, being in rage, being in joy, being in knowledge, being in, you know, active forward motion on different campaigns that impact ideally Black trans folks, but actually lift up all boats in the trans and queer community. So that's what's on the horizon. I'll circle back at thought on the end on the.
That's real. Does anyone else have just any thoughts on, you know, how to continue contributing this month and ongoing, especially through the year, as just so much has changed?
I'll pick it back off J. Marie and say, if you stand with us, please stand with us. If you can march, be there, take action. Because when I said it, I meant it. If you think injustice is a problem for one community and not the other, you're mistaken. It's going to continue to happen, and you're going to continue to see the same things happen over and over again in all the communities. So if you're not standing with us, you're basically standing against the whole movement of equality in the first place.
Absolutely. J. Marie, you were just kind of giving a lot of advice to what seemed to be more non-Black folks that they can be giving support. What advice do you have for Black and brown folks, especially during this time? And, you know, of course, specifically within the queer community.
Yeah, well, I think what I'm gonna say might not come easily to some folks, because I know now is not a normal time. But, you know, I've been through a few of these different uprisings, and I can't even speak on it as if I'm any older than I am folks who've been through decades of this, right? And we know that each moment is a little different than the one before, because otherwise, you know, that moment probably wouldn't have happened if the uprising from before wouldn't happen, right? But when it comes to this one, I know that, you know, having watched specifically for me, it feels like training Black trans folks be killed in a really rapid way, and in a way that doesn't get any attention. I'm very used to having to focus on myself and find my joy in spite of, right? In spite of the stakes on the outside. So, you know, in this moment, when a Black cis man was killed and we have the video of it, you know, I'm also thinking of all the Black women that have been killed, right? Breonna Taylor's birthday is tomorrow, right? And nothing has been done for her killers. It's wild. You know, I did some Instagram kind of rapid, sent an email to the people in charge, and the pre-form email they said was like, kind of used a lot of big words, right? Like white supremacy, if not for white supremacy, it wouldn't have happened, all this good stuff, right? But I think when it comes to, when you're talking to police or when you're talking to specific audience people, it's important to use like, say what you mean to say, which white supremacy is part of what we mean to say. But that, I think, on the one hand, actually lets white people off, because all they have to do is say the phrase and they can go to the next thing. Do you know what I'm saying? So I'm looking at, what are we able to put into execution space? What are we able to like move through that's not just a big word? Because I think that we've all focused on getting people to say it as if just the saying of it is gonna get the result. But the frustrating part, right, is that white folks have been resistant for so long that the saying part feels like the win, when really the saying part is the shifted policy, the shifted reality, not the, I don't wanna have to fight you to say a word, to have it come out of your mouth, right? So when we write our letters and send our information out and do that work to close the gap between what we are experiencing and what we deserve, I want us to be as specific as possible. And our ability to do that rests on our ability to know that we are worthy regardless of what's going on in the outside whirlwind, right? And I think in a moment like this, it's very easy to like put your self-care on hold, to act like, or to be kind of almost social media cornered into thinking that you have to be dropping everything you were doing because the world is on fire. And we do want to make sure that we are responsive to a moment. But at the end of the day, like I mentioned to a friend earlier, most of us are just going to do our best to stay Black, trans, and die. Like that's what we are out here doing because, you know, and live in the meantime, because like we really don't feel an accountability to other institutions or groups in ways that other people might assume we do, right? We're so used to people not necessarily showing up for us. Not that we're not going to show up for you, but the thing is, for me specifically, as an example, my literal job and all the projects I do with my free time are about Black trans people. My literal job is about trans people around the state. Sayer could tell you, ever since I landed here, they've been like, Jay been like, Black trans people, everything. You don't even have to ask, you know what I'm saying? Like people know you can't be friends with me and not love the people that I love. So if you are in my circle, the expectation is high. And if you are not in my circle, the expectation is still high, but I'm not going to personally hold you accountable. Like people say, it's not your job to do the work or whatever, right? Or to teach people. I don't think of it as it's not my job. My job is to keep my people safe and love on folks in this life in the ways that we are best suited to and know how. And if that means that I need to ignore white people, or if that means I need to focus on one organization or focus on one offering, like Sweet And or the Black Trans Bike Experience, I'm going to do that because that's what that joy, that embodied freedom, that $200, you deserve that. You deserved it before the world got on fire. So I'm gonna make sure that in this moment, when everybody's confused, I have a clear sense of what to do. So if you wanna listen to Black people, here's what I'm about to do. You can do that with me, or you can do something else. But that's where so Black folks, for me, to answer your initial question is, you have to be willing to focus on yourself. You can't be here for the whirlwind of everybody else, because that's honestly for people who just got here. You can be Black and just be learning. I had to undo a lot of anti-Blackness myself. But if you have done this before, your job is to not do the same thing again, right? What they call that, insanity? Not the ableist version, but like really is. You know what I'm saying? If you out here doing the same stuff, you looking silly after a while. I'm not trying to be silly. I don't come from a silly lineage. You know what I'm saying? So I'm trying to make sure that the people that I know and love are able to like execute their vision because they deserve. Everything that we were doing before George Floyd was killed, that's still important. Everything we were dreaming about, wanting to do, we deserve to achieve those things. And I don't mean it as, you know, we don't care about George, we don't care about Breonna, we don't care about, all these names, right? I mean it as the most beautiful resistance thing that you can do sometimes is take care of yourself, right? Audre Lorde said it. Self-preservation is an act of warfare. You don't have to be out there with a gun to be fighting a battle. So that's the work that I hope that this rest of this panel can be built on. I think we got it.
Yeah, that's really important. I think just as you're touching on really protecting your peace, you know, as well. And I think it seems to me that you're in a lot of spaces where that piece is vulnerable, right? It can be. How are you personally and like the people around you going about just continuing to protect each other's peace? How is that something that has like manifested in your life?
I mean, bail friends and keeping the standard high for people I'm on panels with. Like, you know what I'm saying? Y'all are here, y'all got work to do. And I think if your hasn't shifted right now, you don't come to me and ask me how to shift it. Listen to your gut, right? That says, wow, I need to be doing something else. Wow, this panel does need to take 20 minutes to talk about the context before I get to talk. Oh man, and I gotta not disconnect, right? I gotta listen. That's my work. Or like, wow, there's no Black people in my pictures on our social media or any of that. Wow, that's a shit. Why is that? Is that because we don't actually serve Black people? Or is that because we just don't have any stock photos of Black? Like, you know what I'm saying? Find your lane. You know what I'm saying? Like figure out where the least empty gesture is and go forward, right? Be in community with folks, but don't ask people, I think we're in this weird kind of section, right? Where it's like, don't ask Black people to do your work for you, but don't do anything about talking to Black people. It's kind of an interesting dynamic that may or may not come, you know, we're gonna have to find some other solutions as we go. But like I said, if you are not in relationship to organizations that prioritize Black people, that is where you need to begin. Because we got to share the work. I'm not trying to tell Promo what to do or Vivent what to do necessarily. I don't really know your structures of your work, but I do know that Black trans folks, Black queer folks are disproportionately experiencing HIV, you know what I'm saying? Living with HIV, right? But if there's no people, you know, people have been putting out statements, organizations, and then the next, my favorite tweets are like, show us your board of directors as soon as you put your statement out, right? So, and these aren't empty words. Like I'm not interested in tweeting people memeing people into better. I don't think that's how things necessarily get executed. I think that's how you start to think about how things are connected. But here we are in this space of, wow, we can do anything. So much is at stake right now. That means we can all choose anything. So how do you choose that thing that is the most Black affirming, the most trans affirming as you go, because those have always been the stakes. Y'all just got here and now you see oh, there's some urgency to it. Okay, cool. But you have to find a way to sustain yourself and your organization so that you can bring this urgency to all of your work while keeping your blood pressure down. Welcome to Black Life.
Word. Yeah. I feel like this is an ongoing pandemic in addition to the COVID pandemic. And for Black folks, this has always been a pandemic, you know what I mean? It's not anything new, but COVID is. And I'm also curious and would love to talk about how the health pandemic going on is affecting our vulnerable LGBTQIA plus populations. Sayer, is there, how are you seeing this manifest in your work?
I mean, it's manifested in a number of ways. I think the largest way is that we turned our community living space into a gigantic food pantry. We are serving in a day the amount of humans that we served in a month. We had a small handful of folks who were pretty reliant on us for most of their food. And that is, I mean, it's larger than I can count at this point. We rapidly responded to the needs of the folks, and comfort too, right? Like in the heat of it, we were delivering food, and we were delivering toiletries and puzzles and makeup and things, just like to help people have a little bit of joy in a really frightening time. And comfort, love letters and sweet soaps for people. So yeah, it's changed everything. I mean, it was relatively seamless to like switch our support groups from on the couches in our family room into online. And it took a lot more figuring out how to become a full-time food pantry with delivery service when our line item in our budget for our food pantry was like $2,000, and within the first month we spent $9,000. So like just trying to figure that out and not getting the government all up and involved, because the USDA doesn't want us to have a delivery service. They want people to have to come to our house to get our food, and that's just not realistic to ask a compromised trans human, or hell, just a trans human in general, to get on that bus and come get a couple bags of food. Like, that's just not realistic. So again, as we do, as trans folks do, as queer folks do, we created our own system, and we're doing it. And we're loving on people with food and with toiletries.
Yeah. What are some of the other just more unique challenges that we're seeing in our community right now as a result of COVID? I think, food, toiletries, little bits of joy, those are things that really everyone is in search of and in search of more of. But what things are really unique to the queer community right now that we're experiencing?
Is that directed at me?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, look, a lot of folks, isolation, a lot of folks found themselves coming in through the doors of this house and feeling like once a month, once every week, they could be themselves and they could be validated and loved on, and have somebody hold up a mirror and tell them how lovely they are, right? And then this hit, and that's just not happening. And a lot of our folks, like, I think I had intellectualized how unsafe some people's environments are for them just to be themselves. And so I think that is unique to the trans experience, as far as, I mean, I know a lot of my gay and lesbian friends who were able to get right on their computer and fix up their spare room into a fancy office, and they're like tele doing their thing, all good. And then these other folks who are relying on different kind of alternate economies are at a halt, or they're continuing to do this work and putting themselves at risk. So I think profound loneliness is definitely a casualty of this virus. And then also just a lack of any sort of economic security. And a lot of our folks relied on the service industry for their finances. And so it's been really challenging and really tricky to, and a unique time for sure, and I think the Sweet and Fun that J. Marie speaks of, that was a gift for so many humans, and not just the financial though, but Jay Marie produced a program where everybody would get calls and get tenderness and get connection and get like, really, we're checking in on you because we love you, you're our family, you know? And so that's, I mean, I'm really proud of the way that trans queer folks responded to this COVID, you know, locally. Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing to hear. Just the response that has occurred and is continuing to. Obviously, as healthcare has shifted, that presents problems of its own, especially with our trans individuals in the community, those with HIV/AIDS, those who are imprisoned. James, what have you seen with that in your work?
Yeah, I mean, the healthcare community from our end, it's like we always look at it as upended, right? There are already enough barriers to getting care, right? So, you know, this is just like one more barrier of decreasing people's access to healthcare. So healthcare systems, I think, like across the board have reduced services. People are losing their jobs. You know, with job loss comes a loss of insurance. Vivent Health prides itself on treating everyone regardless of care, so that puts a heavier financial burden on us in an effort to kind of decrease those barriers. And, you know, it's all compounded by a lot of mistrust that exists in healthcare systems already between people of color, trans folks, LGBTQIA people. So, you know, even just rebuilding trust in a healthcare environment is already a challenge, much less compounded by a pandemic. And then, you know, you look at things like transportation schedules being affected for people who don't have an automobile. And we've really just been trying to kind of address all of those needs heads on, like just however we can. And that old saying that, you know, necessity is the mother of innovation. It's really forced us to do some quick growing. A lot of our HIV positive patients and just other people in the LGBTQIA community already face some comorbidities, whether it's lung disease from smoking, being diabetic. So these kind of increase their complications and risk with COVID-19. So, you know, it's really important to keep them safe at home. So we've really had to kind of overnight transition to delivering things either in a contactless setting, whether it's doing food delivery, pharmacy delivery, or doing telehealth virtual check-ins. Our medical clinic's only been seeing people on an as-needed basis, you know, for if you're actually experiencing illness. Sent, I think, 90% of our workforce to work from home. Virtual visits have been really helpful in decreasing some of these barriers. But even things like childcare becomes an issue when you're trying to have a virtual visit and you've got a kid running around, and, you know, it's just kind of a lot of things all at once. And so, yeah, I think really we're just really focused on keeping people feeling that they can still access quality care in a meaningful way. I think, you know, even down to like HIV testing, we're sending out at-home testing kits. And then we're having you kind of Skype with a provider and walking you through that, because just the humanity and the fear around taking an HIV test alone and finding you might be living with HIV, you know, and if you're at home alone and having to process that, it's just like a terrible reality to face that we're just kind of facing head on as best as we can.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any opportunities for just our local community to be supporting Vivent Health as far as like those wraparound services that you're, you know, kind of innovating around?
Yeah, I think that's the other challenging part, is there's so much willingness for people to help. And we're really focused on keeping our clients safe. And to that end, we are like just limiting the number of people who come through our door every day to those who absolutely need essential services, which is why we're doing things like food delivery, medication delivery, you know, at-home testing. And yeah, it like breaks my heart that there are so many people with big hearts who are willing to support. I think, you know, I appreciate that, but really not at this time, but we do have some amazing volunteers that I miss very much.
Looking forward to workspaces and as things are becoming more remote. Shira, can you talk through a few ways that we can be advocating just for more inclusive workspaces, especially, you know, just with regard for flexibility around, we've talked about transportation and how inaccessible that can be. And then you add on, you know, the pandemic and all the changes that that has caused. What ways can we be advocating and, you know, giving our time, our resources to making more inclusive workspaces for LGBTQIA community?
Yeah, so I think that what's important to note is a lot of businesses and organizations focus on diversity and inclusion at the start of hiring practices. And there's a lot of great trainings on how to set up essentially like how are we going to create equal employment opportunities for expanding our diversity and inclusion. And then it kind of stops there. And a lot of the work that we do is trying to work holistically from the ground level of staff all the way up to executive levels for how to incorporate policy changes along the entire way and or trainings to really get at understanding what is the experience of somebody who is has a marginalized identity inside of the workplace, and how can we best accommodate that experience and not isolate it. And I think that, or Promo is seeing, probably we're all seeing, that this pandemic has really exposed a lot of the holes in the policies that we have for employees, specifically in healthcare access or specifically in like child care needs, and or just like how are companies and organizations shifting to make sure that people can still show up if we're able to still show up, or how are we making sure that we can employ still as many people as we needed in the first place. And while we're taking the time to rethink how we are structuring our workplaces or structuring employee experiences, that we're still paying attention to the entire package of policies by understanding the experience of every single one of our employees and making sure that their experience is centered, a marginalized identity experience is centered. And that looks a lot for us as not just stopping at like an equal employment policy, or we call it like an SOGI, making sure that you have hiring practices that include sexual orientation and gender identity, but that you have like anti-retaliation and harassment policies inside of your workplace, that you have transition policies for transgender employees, that the healthcare benefits that you provide to every single employee covers LGBTQ couples, families, have gender affirming care, and that they cover the needs of trans expansive employees, considering that transgender individuals often need care that is different from every other employee in your workplace. And so making sure that from like the outset, that when you hand over somebody a medical benefits package, that it includes care that they are going to access, and that you've thought through what those care entail or needs, that you have hired, or that you like, if your company is large enough, that you have an ERG or an employee resource group, so that you've asked your workplaces to center LGBTQ employees, to let them convene and figure out the data that they want to collect about each other and their workplace experiences through very confidential ways. The data that you are collecting, that they are collecting, is confidential. And it assesses how LGBTQ employees feel inside of the workplace, that how their experiences are being assessed, to better understand what those needs are for them to feel successful as an employee of your organization. That if you have dress codes, this could go for like schools that we work with and things like offices or organizations, that dress codes ensure that there's nothing gendered about them when they're dressing professionalism, that LGBTQ cultural competency trainings are like a part of employee onboarding, that they're not something that starts with the first time you step into a door and then never again, that they are something that is renewed every single year and that they are expanded upon every year. There's more than just this is the acronym of LGBTQ and this is what this means, but each time you build onto the training, that it gets deeper and deeper into the understanding and experience of LGBTQ people, and that it's mandatory every year, especially for higher levels of employees, if that is something that your organization works with. Especially right now, I think in this time of what I would say normally as pride of corporate outspeak of organizations that are supporting a cause, but also with corporations taking stances on how they are working through a pandemic, and even more so now that organizations are centering racial justice at the very impetus of the center of their work, that organizations are supporting advocacy, that they are taking a firm stance on policy changes at their state level, not just their national level, but they're saying, if we are going to be an organization or a corporation in this state, and we have these workplace practices, that we also are going to be an organization that needs to have these policies at a statewide level. And they are speaking out on that from that place of influence and pushing elected officials to go in the direction of policy change once they as an organization are centering the experiences of their employees and practicing that effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking about just LaunchCode's mission to, continue improving workforce development, how are you seeing the pandemic shift the landscape with regard to workforce development and, just professional development?
Is that my question?
Yes.
How is the pandemic shifting workforce development? I don't think I can answer that as from my perspective in communications of promo. If anybody else has a better understanding of that.
I mean, I can add something in this moment. The ACLU and many people across the state are looking really seriously at decriminalizing sex work and what that work is going to look like, specifically in Kansas City and St. Louis as like hyper-focused locales where we can do that. Includes focusing on prosecutor, all that kind of stuff. But we are trying to hire a researcher for that right now. And I think, we were excited to let the world know about it. And there's also a lot going on because, we were excited by saying, oh, we think a lot of people need work right now. So we hope that some, university academic maybe will throw their name in the pot and all that kind of stuff. And some folks have, but it's a little bit lower than we would expect. So I think it's a matter of who has the time to write up a proposal to make sure, and the other thing about hiring too is in this particular issue or incident, there is an expectation of labor on the front end that is often unrealistic for Black folks, for queer folks, for trans folks who are making ends meet. So that could definitely be a part of what's tricky about this process. Sometimes when the level of work is to a type of rigor that you kind of want to weed folks out without having to, tell somebody after the fact that they don't have the skills or whatever. It's helpful to have them kind of say it for themselves what they have, so we don't have to tell you or look around for what you've done. And so I think many of us are always walking those lines in general. And of course, right now, they're just even more stark because the same inadequacies or ways that organizations were going through trying to give people resources, but still putting all these, stipulations on it. Oh yeah, we'll give you money, but it's only got to be a gift card, which you can't pay no bills with. You can't, so things like that are always going to be a part of it. And that's one of the reasons why we really, unless it's a very specific gift card for something that we are requiring people to do, we have gatherings and we give people gift cards for gas because we know they cannot come unless they don't have gas. But otherwise, my program possibilities really, I try to veer away from gift cards because I know people just need green hard cash, So I think in the way that in this moment, we're all trying to, reel from initially the pandemic with this other pandemic we got reminded of, many of us have stayed living with. I think everything's just coming to a head. And I think, like I said earlier, if you are not in relationship to or in consistent struggle with Black folks or Black organizations, or you don't prioritize that, it might seem out of the blue to do it because you're just oh, but I don't know if we have enough of a base, or it's but the reality is they don't come because you don't show that they're welcome, right? So there's Black people everywhere. St. Louis is half Black. Kansas City is almost half Black too. right? But the ways that segregation has taught us that people aren't around, or that they don't have the services, or they don't have the skills, are things that we have to undo in our own brains, in our own boardrooms, that's completely unrelated to what's going on the streets. I think people should be taking their board meetings out and doing protesting. If you get COVID, you get COVID. You know what I'm saying? Like, in terms of if you're not Black, that's how I feel. People should be putting their bodies on the line, you know what I'm saying, figuring it out. If you are immunocompromised, that's real. Send your cousin. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know, because the stakes they're gonna be high, right? So obviously these things are just highlighted right now in a more intense way. And I think it's our work to do the same thing that the diversity consultant told you the last time they came over, to do whatever workshop, or to do whatever, you know what I'm saying? You're supposed to do it then, you're supposed to do it now. And it can seem overwhelming, because that means we can literally do anything. And in the moments when the world's falling apart, it feels like anything goes, right? But what it really means is, what is your gift? What is your commitment? And how are you leaning more deeply into those, with a commitment to Black folks, and in this work, trans and queer folks along with it.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Also, this is, the Queer Tech Symposium. We haven't touched much on tech yet, but I'm curious what you all think about leveraging tech and data to better reach and support the LGBTQIA plus community. J. Marie, do you mind letting us know your thoughts on that?
Tell me the question again.
Just leveraging tech and data to better support and reach the community.
Yeah, well, I think on the one hand, like I said, everything I just said applies, right? That, like, if you are trying to meet a need that either one, you don't have confident evidence that it is a need, you stop that right now. And then if you do have a confident, clear reason to meet a need, if there are not Black folks or queer folks in the room to help really kind of grow that need and get that need met, that's another thing, like I said. So, but as far as tech, I mean, one of the things that mutual aid at large, so there's St. Louis Mutual Aid, and then there's the Sweet And effort that was trans and queer kind of sweet, right, specific and statewide. But I was also on the St. Louis Mutual Aid team and am on it. It's just, there's so much going on. So I would say one of the things that they've been doing is using, the structures that they work with in their different organizations, developers, or email gurus. Like, email is a whole universe to itself, right? So how are we mobilizing the resources that we already have, as well as there's a tech working group for the mutual aid project that is essentially trying to, they're thinking about planning a hackathon. They're thinking about planning, really giving people priority and giving them time and space to work together to figure that out, I think, is another way that you can prioritize meeting folks' needs, right? So it's not you in a silo. It should never be you by yourself. You know what I'm saying? Unless, I know there's some confidentiality, all kinds of stuff like that. But really, if you know the people that you're dealing with enough, you shouldn't have to worry about that, right? Because the people that you're working with will also care about those people and not be putting them in danger along the way. So I think anytime you can get people together on your team and really focus on meeting a need in the immediate, yes, but also always having a commitment to the longer term, that is what people should be doing right now. And then as far as, I've also done work with Code 2040, which is a Black and brown kind of organization in California, and with a nationwide reach in terms of giving internships to Black and brown coders, trying to find work in the industry. And, they've been providing people with internships, or even, sending them through code schools, but the companies that they work for are still not interested in hiring, because there's really no bottom line improvement commitment. Like, that they don't get a sticker for it, right? They just get that internal satisfaction. And for as far as we've seen, most people are not driven by internal satisfaction. You know what I'm saying? Unless you put heaven at the end of it, they often don't care, right? It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna work for that, right? And that's why I say you have to be in relationship to Black people. Your heart has to be like not stone, and you have to be feeling something when you see these kinds of things happen, people being murdered in front of your screens, or beat up at a gas station with 20 other people attacking them. Like, if your heart doesn't feel and you're not drawn to action, not only do I not know what to tell you, but that means you have some heart work to do that is separate from whatever you wrote on your board meetings and your notes. And that's not what the issue is. You got some other deeper work to do. So you can't really code your way through that. You can't create an app because you don't have a soul. So, I mean, I just encourage people to go inward, you know what I'm saying? And, because I don't want your app if it doesn't have your soul in it, if it doesn't have our work and our people seen as worthy through the building of it. I don't want your app. I don't want your program. I don't want that. I don't want your conference, So you got to do that internal work and bring people in the room to get it done.
It's very real. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I've always like something that's drawn me to our organization is that we're really, really data driven. We have a whole quality management department, and we really attribute that to our ability to analyze what's creating these barriers in people's care. And across the board, we beat these national benchmarks for care set for people living with HIV/AIDS. And we really attribute that to the fact that we pay really close attention to the data we receive and put a lot of heart and thought into the meaning of what that data means. And, you know, as an organization that exists in 4 different states, it feels timely that, you know, we're sharing this information, and our strength is our network. Just looking at kind of speaking personally, a failed national response to COVID-19, you can draw a lot of parallels between the national response to HIV and AIDS. And so, you know, all of these HIV/AIDS kind of grassroots organizations started popping up. You know, we think that there needs to be more strength in a network of these so that everyone's sharing information, looking at the information we have so that everybody gets better treatment living with HIV and AIDS, not just based on what city you live in. So yeah, I think there's a lot of value to be had in there. It's a solid investment for any organization.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, you're right on, James. We have to make, and Sayer, you guys at MTUC do a great job at, the system is not there to do it, so we're going to build it ourselves. And we have to make sure that we're doing that as a people, and think about that mindset more of the system is messed up. And the system was not created to think about us. So we're going to have to think about it and create it ourselves. The same way that Vivent started here in St. Louis as Effort for AIDS was because because there was a problem within our community, and a bunch of drag queens came together and put together a show to start and fun to start what now is Vivent. Yo, this is our history. And this is what we are as a people. So we got to take care of ourselves. We got to do what's necessary. We got to do whatever it takes. When J. Marie, when you did the fund, if I wasn't broke, I was going to give you whatever I could because I saw and recognized that this is what we have to do because nobody else is doing it for us. So we have to step up for ourselves and take a stance and come together and unite when we can to support each other, because it's not happening. It's not. As much as we want to see the rainbows, that we want to see the sunshine and the lollipops, it's not happening. We got to do it ourselves.
Absolutely. As a follow-up, we have received a question from Facebook. Someone asked, what does queer pride have to do with tech? Is anyone interested in answering that question?
I can just speaking from experience, I think the LGBTQIA community is kind of an early adapter of social media and technology for the necessity of connecting. You know, for people living in small communities where there's not a significant gay population, I think, you know, it's like a very base level need. It's not like a earth-shattering answer, and I'm sorry it's not more impactful, but I mean, I think the LGBT community really adapts to technology because of connectivity.
Oh yeah, definitely think that's true. I know for me, like when I was trying to figure out how to come out or what exactly what language I might use, right? The internet was and has continued to be a really important resource because we are not welcome to be ourselves in our full bodies, right? So it's weird because I think so many of us, like I have friends trans friends, specifically trans women, Black trans women friends who were in the house before COVID, right? They didn't come out the house because it's not safe. That's not even a joke. Like, you know, like I had a friend who lived in town in St. Louis for the whole year. And part of it is St. Louis people don't just come out the house. That's its own thing. But also Black trans women, like I barely saw her because there's no events that, whether you're trans or not, obviously the stakes can become higher at any moment. There's shootings, there's racism, you know, police might pull you over. It's just a lot to look out for. So you add trans on top of that. And you know, this video of Ayanna Dior, right, being literally beat up by 20 to 30 people at a gas station. had to go behind where the people, like the people that you pay, the register, to like avoid the people. And they weren't even necessarily protecting her. They just were talking and kind of trying to not be in it. But this is a young person who's this big, right? And people say, oh, it's men and women, and you know what I'm saying? It's not about what's between your legs. If you're trying to fight somebody, finish what you started. You don't need to bring anybody else in it. Just get what you need to get and move on, right? Sometimes that's how we settle things. But at the end of the day, like, if you're not aware of that, you can think that people are overreacting. If you think that if you don't realize that you could accidentally hit somebody else's car and it could escalate to you getting beat up by 30 people, you are going to think that it's extra for you to not leave your house. But that's what people are dealing with. Like that, I see my friend on FaceTime more than I see in real life because this world is so antagonistic to her presence, her beauty. You know what I'm saying? And like, that's a problem that I have every day of the year, not just because somebody else got killed the other day and reminded the rest of the world that there's problems, right? So I'm holding all of it, and I'm excited for us to make the most of these uprisings because we need to be reinvigorated. This work is a lot. This world is a lot. So it's helpful when you bring other people in the mix and you say, oh, we all about to do this together? Bet. Cool. Let's see what we can get if we just push a little bit harder for a little while, right? And then whenever it peters out, which maybe it'll be in 5 years, like maybe it'll be a continued uprising for a very long time. I don't know. Until COVID hits, we can't really know what's going to happen with this moment, right? But people have to recognize that, again, like, I don't want your app. And the other half of this question that I wanted to highlight is that, what does queer pride have to do with tech? I had pulled it up. This person also said meritocracy, regardless of what groups you want to define yourself in, right? That is absolutely white supremacist language. That is like, who decides who has the merit? Who decides who is working hard enough to begin with? Who decides that the work you do to leave your house, to wax your face so people don't think you're a man, like, who decides that that was not as worthy of whatever programming you did? Who decides? Your brain isn't clear because you just got attacked at the store on your way to work. I don't care what you think is meritocratic, right? So like, the work is for us to recognize it's not even just about, oh, I want to be friends with people and I want to know their inner experiences. It's like, you just need to understand the stakes are a lot higher than you think they are at work, because you wrote that down in your board meeting, and you wrote that, and your supervisor said you have to do it. Your manager, your departments. You know what I'm saying? When I walk out that door, or when I leave my office and that place where I agree to follow those rules, the world doesn't care about those rules. And so I need to be held as a person who, I don't necessarily need to be your best friend. You don't need to be bringing me dinner. We don't need to be like love. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have to be a part of the equation per se, but the work is only going to be as good as people feel like they belong in a space. Like they feel like they can share if something is really high stakes in their life. And not everybody wants to bring their life into work. Some people can separate really easily. But at the end of the day, to separate yourself from your work is its own kind of, again, I don't want your app if your soul's not in it. It's another way that happens. That you asked me to leave something outside when you actually want that in your work. Otherwise, your work would look the same as everybody else's who's here. So it's about that nuance that we don't lose sight of, because we're going to be better for it.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I was sitting back thinking as well, as like, why wouldn't tech and queerness go together? I mean, first off, when we think about, I hate to use this as an example, but even if you think about the hookup app of Grindr and how it started, and then all of a sudden now there's plenty of fish, and all of a sudden we set trends. We set trends, and we changed the world. And so sometimes, and those apps and those devices were set, like, being honest, as a civil engineer, I need to find a way to connect with people. So now the next thing it can be when it comes down to tech is, now how can I take tech and solve the issue of HIV? Oh, well, let's do virtual testing now. Since we can't go out to each other, let's take it to each other in a virtual way. There's always ways that we can add technology and bring these two things together to make it happen. Tonight, I also work for ASO, a service organization. I'm doing my support group via technology, because we can't meet together because of the number of people that's going to be there. Technology is huge and it's real. We have to make sure that we use these tools and put them in our tool belt to make sure that we're able to still build and connect with each other, but also to make life better for each other, for ourselves. So, I mean, thinking of if there was a way to make something better for a queer person, technology is going to be involved. Let's do it. They go hand in hand.
Yeah, something is, I think And I think people take for granted there's a level of security when you're engaging with technology, and whether that's, you know, being a trans person looking for your tribe or seeking out education on HIV because you've had an unsafe encounter. As an organization, we've seen that when we offer telehealth behavioral health counseling, our no-show rate is significantly lower when we do telehealth encounters as opposed to person. And, you know, again, we're exploring the data and trying to determine why, but it seems like people just have a little bit more of a feeling of safety when you're doing a virtual behavioral health visit as opposed to sitting face-to-face with someone who knows, you may run into schnooks later, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
There's significant overlap.
I just wanted to flag the question in the Q&A. I know we're wrapping up, so I just wanted to flag that. I think it's for Shira.
Let me say that. Okay, yeah. We have a question for Shira. What can we do to address microaggressions to queer people at the workplace?
I mean, I think the first thing is creating a culture that embraces every single person and the experience of the people that you employ in your workplace. It's not about doing D&I work. It's about making sure that you have changed the culture of your workplace so that every single employee feels that they have a space that they can go to talk about whatever is coming up between employees or between the conversations that are happening in work. And making sure that, like, when you hire somebody under the auspices of, this is the transgender person I just hired, this is the Black person I just hired, that you're not tokenizing that person and or making them a one-off person amongst your D&I policies. And so it's a very long game of how do we deal with microaggressions. We have to change the culture of our workplace so that there's no tolerance for that kind of behavior and or chat or water cooler talk or whatever it is inside of your workplace that fuels the kind of level of interactions between employees that those occur in, and that we're creating a space for people to go to have conversations outside of the interaction to make sure that there's a system in place that can cut them out or that can truly, under some kind of clause of protection, keep the security of behavior of the person who is so-called blown the whistle on something that has happened or made them feel uncomfortable in a workplace. But it truly is doing the work. And not just changing policies.
Absolutely. It looks like we had another question from Facebook that was closely aligned. What advice would you give organizations who want to further support their employees who are part of the LGBTQ community? And, you know, to me, it sounds like it's a very, very close answer as far as like genuinely working to create that culture where we can feel safe. So.
Yeah, and asking.
Does anyone else have any other?
Those LGBTQ employees, what they need out of their workplace, making sure that you're asking the people who live it to provide the answers for their own success.
Yeah, absolutely. We at LaunchCode have actually enacted something similar with regard for anti-racism, which is really great. It's just, you know, a dialogue group that people can jump in and continue that work and have a little bit of accountability. So I think things like that as well, where people have the opportunity to continue learning, you know, and engage in that work as far as generating a healthier culture. I think those would be great things as well. Let's see what else we have here. I think that may be all from our Facebook questions, but before we wrap up, I would love to just hear what are a couple actions that we could all take moving forward during Pride Month. So do we want to start with just some actions that would be beneficial to your organization or just at large?
I'll start. I think across the board, simply listening, which sounds really basic, but I think a lot of people listen and then try to respond or try to defend. And, you know, whether that's having uncomfortable conversations in the workplace about having an open, accepting workplace, whether that's about, you know, larger social justice issues, you know, when someone's offering their thoughts, don't make it such a two-way conversation, listen.
Does anyone else have any additional actions that we can be considering and taking?
I want to encourage my white friends, since we're on Facebook, when in lieu of saying, you're blocked, never again, or unfriend me if you are racist, to encourage conversation with your friends and your family, and especially your family, because it's our job to do that right now. Unfriending people, blocking people, mocking people is not going to bring people in. It's not going to help awaken people. The reason that I am able to be aware of my own privilege is because I had privilege around that. I was able to pay for classes. I was able to be in environments where I was able to unpack some of those things. And not everybody has that. So I think that it's really our duty as white people to do that. And I'm going to especially talk to my trans expansive white family that we have our own real special form of racism that is incredibly hurtful, incredibly problematic, and MTUG in particular. So here's something that we are trying to do is we're trying to create a family room online to come in and talk about that stuff in a way that we will meet you where you are at and try to get you to a different place. So I think that it is our duty to have those conversations, and it is of course our duty to put ourselves out there. But I think certainly in this time of COVID where folks are afraid, we're using technology to come to you. So trying to make it accessible, right? So that would be my go-to or my encouragement for my white friends.
Thank you for sharing that.
I love that, Sarah, and I'm glad that the white trans kind of learning spaces is happening because, you know, it's funny, and I don't want people can come get at me if they want to, but as somebody who did get to go to school, and you know, I went to Stanford, I don't talk about it a lot because I learned what I needed to learn and it's in my past, right? But as somebody who did get to like study Blackness and the Harlem Renaissance and like take time to recognize all the things that we didn't get to learn in school, that did infuse me with some stuff that I now have and walk with, right? In the same way, some people didn't get to learn and just have not been in the rooms where like white privilege and supremacy and these conversations are actually talked about without shame or whatever. And I think that is some of that is white folks' work to talk to each other about, but I also know that the limitations of white folks been talking to each other about things for decades, for centuries. I don't want you to just talk to each other, right? And so that's what I mean by we're at an impasse of like, okay, well, like I said, I don't want you to do stuff by yourself because y'all keep messing it up. And then I also don't want to do the work. So we can't keep, that's a cycle that we're gonna have to grow through as a movement where it's like, it can't be across the board. It's not my job to do the work. I don't think it's anybody's job. I think that's important. But what I'd like to think, and I think Sarah's heard me say this, Shira might have heard me say it, I don't think of it as work because, and that could definitely be privilege. You know what I'm saying? I grew up around white people. My family is Black. All of us are in there. You know what I'm saying? But I think of it as the world that I want needs my magic intact, right? And the world that I exist in needs that too. You know, like, so it's not a job. I want this for myself and for people that I love. And if I don't come and be real about it, it's not going to happen. So it's not about, I need to be monitoring other people and teaching them and giving them worksheets. I was an actual whole teacher. I taught 4th grade, I taught kindergarten, I taught middle school, I taught high school. Like, I've been a whole teacher. I know what it means to teach someone for a job. Telling people that you are magic and deserve to be treated as such is not a job. That is your birthright when you wake up every day. So when you when folks are struggling with how do I hold people accountable around me and how do I do it without draining myself, you decide that. You know what your boundaries are, you know what your limitations are, but that is ultimately, you know, a skill and a muscle that you have to flex for yourself and build in terms of the people around you. You got to know how to do that without draining yourself because they will suck you dry. They don't care. They don't know the answer, else they would have done it already. So instead of being disappointed, because we will perpetually be disappointed, as we are literally in the world right now, seeing what it feels like, mass disappointment, mass upheaval and unrest is gonna happen. And so I'm not even trying to say don't be mad right now. Be mad and recognize your limitations. Boundaries are clutch right now, whether that's a family boundary, a work boundary, like follow through with what you say you're gonna do. But boundaries are important and you get to decide those. And it's not always the same. Not everybody has access to all the things that, you know what I'm saying, keeps us safe. And while we try to have boundaries, Ayanna Stanley Jones ain't had no boundaries, she was asleep. Breonna Taylor ain't had no boundaries, she was asleep. Like, I'm not trying to gaslight anybody, right? And we have to be aware that, like, sometimes we give away our power in ways that we never had a choice as to otherwise, but as we start to see in these moments of uprising, it gives us a reminder that we can choose a little more each time. We can choose accountability, we can choose relationship, we can choose to listen to our gut. You know what I'm saying? There are enough resources to go around, they've just been hoarded. So our job is to go take that back. You know what I'm saying? Our job is to redistribute money when there's an opening in the world and I see, oh wow, people are out here trying to be helpful. I'm gonna stand this little site up and you're gonna give money to this thing, and Sarah and I and all the people that jumped on the team are gonna do it. Like, we wait for permission because the law and all these people tell us we have to, but that stuff is not built for us to think about it. So it's like, some of us, we're definitely gonna have some more political prisoners very soon here. People are gonna be breaking the law because the laws don't deserve to be followed, but we gotta figure out, like, can we keep each other safe while we do it? Because that's what we deserve. We don't deserve to be stressed out every 6 to, you know what I'm saying, like 8 weeks or 4 to 5 years for an uprising. That's not the world that I want, technically. Like, I want the energy, but I want that as a way of life. That's why I work for the ACLU. That's why I do this work that I do, because it's my way of life. And I'm gonna shape my world around it as I decide. And as I, like, learn from other people who have done it before me. So I'm learning, I'm in the lineage of the work. It's not about me deciding it. This is what I feel called to do. And this is what my body has given me. I'm trans. It's just what it is. Instead of running away from it, I'm trying to learn the lineage and listen to the Black women around me, trans or not, and make sure that they don't keep having to do stuff by themselves and that these people can get put to work. They gonna mess it up. They don't understand the stakes. It's gonna happen, but it's not our job to, like, you know what I'm saying, lose ourselves in the process. That's what I would say. Your magic deserves to be said out loud and sprinkled everywhere. So that's the work, is holding on to it so that you have enough when you go where you go.
Sorry, I was on mute. I think that's a really important reframe. I love that. Looks like we are about ready for our technical breakout sessions, which are occurring on Meetup. All of our attendees, that information is in the chat. Before you head out, I would just like to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. This was a great conversation. It doesn't need to stop here. It definitely should not. Keep this conversation going outside of here. And yeah, just thank you for joining us, you all.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Folks, get plugged in. The Black Trans Thursdays this month. The Pride is canceled. You know what I'm saying? Come see what's up tomorrow, and then we're gonna show up all month. I mean, I think I can see all of y'all, either at least in your car, everybody on the panel. You already know about it. You heard about it first. So come on, I'm gonna see you down in the Grove and wherever else we decide to be. Keep y'all on your toes. Thanks, y'all.